Hey guys, Rob Adams here, and this month we're talking about wedding day pitfalls and problems for wedding videographers. Unfortunately, they are plentiful. There's a lot of things that we run into as videographers on the day of a wedding that can really hinder our filmmaking, and I just wanted to address some of the more common ones in the written article, and then I wanted to, in this video, share with you a couple of my personal experiences and then show you some video clips that illustrate the problems that we ran into and then how we may or may not have dealt with it. Because, as long as I've been doing this, we've gotten very good at what we do, I think, but we also fail from time to time just by not having foresight or not taking initiative to learn about a certain circumstance before we go into it. So I wanted to illustrate some of that. This first example I'm going to show you is from a wedding we did in Brooklyn, and I really have no excuse on this wedding because there was no photographer this day. The bride hired my team and me exclusively for video. There was no photographer, so we really had sort of the run of the day. The only thing was the schedule was really kind of messed up, and there was really no time built in for any sort of a photo session or any sort of creative shooting. So each of the events kind of ran one right into each other. I think we were so excited at the aspect of shooting a wedding without a photographer present that we really kind of neglected the thought that goes into proper planning. So when it came time for the ceremony, we didn't realize how small the ceremony location was going to be, and this really kind of hurt us. I do run 3 cameras during a wedding ceremony, so the 2 side angles we had were beautiful and tight, and we were able to shoot through the bridal party that was standing up there, and it looked phenomenal. But the third aisle camera from in the back of the ceremony was a disaster. People weren't instructed to sit down during the ceremony, so everybody was standing the entire time. So we didn't have a clean line of sight to the bride and groom from the back of the ceremony. And you see here in the film, that really hurt us because there's people just kind of staggered out throughout the aisle, leaning out. They've got cameras in their hands. And if we had just had a little bit of foresight and asked somebody before the ceremony what the rundown is going to be, which, by the way, we make a practice of most weddings, I think on this one we just dropped the ball. We didn't think about it in this circumstance, and it actually affected the quality of the film. So as wedding videographers, we really have to think about all the different angles. And in this one particular circumstance, having people leaning out into the aisles kind of ruined the aesthetic of that third angle shot. In the second video here, this one was all about ceremony lighting. This is a beautiful wedding that took place in a venue called Capital in New York City. It's an old bank building and it's gorgeous on the inside. And the planners did an amazing job of lighting this ceremony. It had a big Jewish chuppah made out of all flowers and branches. It was absolutely gorgeous. We normally light ceremonies in an instance like this, but we saw how much lighting was going to be present for this wedding, and we said, you know what? Let's just rely on the lighting that's going to be given to us. And the result was a little disappointing. We ended up with a lot of shadows on the bride and groom's faces, and not running lights on top of our cameras, there's really no way to fill this in. I don't recommend putting a light on top of the camera, by the way. Just to me, it screams amateur. But there really wasn't optimal lighting there for us to film. So while it had some beautiful qualities to it, I think the lighting in the ceremony could have been a little bit better. And this is what we do. We go back through our films and critique what mistakes we've made, so we try not to repeat those mistakes again in the future. But again, this is just one of those circumstances that if we knew in advance what the lighting was going to be like, just by walking up underneath the chuppah before the ceremony, we would have had a better idea of what the lighting was going to be like in our cameras. The last example I'm going to show you is just an example of pure buffoonery on our part. We didn't check to make sure our cameras are running the right frame rate. And while this isn't so much of a big deal if you're shooting with a DSLR camera, but with the cameras we shoot with at the present time, the Canon C100, there's really no good 30 frame per second option. It's not a professional frame rate codec in this particular camera. Don't ask me why. Write to Canon and you probably won't get a response. But normally we shoot at 24 frames per second, and we had done a couple of corporate jobs ahead of this job and we didn't switch the cameras back over. So it turned into be a big problem for us in post-production. So we ended up having to just edit the whole job in 30 frames per second, so it doesn't have that film quality that you get from shooting at 23:9:8 or 24 frames per second in a DSLR. I wouldn't say it really broke this film. The film still looks good in my opinion, but it was just one of those little oversights that kind of irks me. So I hope my article this month helped you to just kind of be more aware of the things that can happen on a wedding day if you're a wedding videographer, and then give you some tips and tricks on how to overcome them. So thanks for reading the article, and we'll see you next month.